Oh, very nice. My vision on tropical coastal modeling and observations. Now, this picture shows the essence of ZMT, which is to understand the relation between tropical coastal ecosystems and humans, right? So that's at the center of ZMT. And this picture, I think, sums it up very, very transparently. So, first of all, I would like to say congratulations for a joint effort. So this TropEcS, in my view, was a way to bring people together here at ZMT and get everybody to contribute to a joint proposal. So I think it's a joint effort, and everybody who has contributed, thank you for that. I think we have achieved a nice start. So this is only the start, of course, right? So the work is ahead. Now, this schematic was taken from the proposal, and it shows that we want to combine and couple different components of the Earth system, and that's the challenge ahead, to get these components coupled. Right, so let's start from ecology. This is all I know about ecology, basically. The competitive exclusion principle, it will be known to many of you. When two species, here two kind of fish species that are preying on the same, exclusively on the same resource, then one of these two species of fish have to collapse. That's the competitive exclusion principle. This looks different when you have two species that are preying on two other species. Then this competitive exclusion principle does not apply because you have two resources here. Right, so why do I say this? Because these are so-called zero-dimensional models. They are the simplest kind of ecological model you can make. Now, why do I mention zero-dimensional models? Because Earth is not zero-dimensional, right? For example, if you had a rock and you populated this rock surface with lichen communities, that's a kind of, think of it as some kind of microbial communities that are populating this rock, then they might populate that in a sort of two-dimensional fashion. And already in these two dimensions, you can have an abundance of species coexisting. So at the center of ecology on Earth is the fact that we have a spatial system. Now, this rock is a fairly simplistic case of a spatial system because the rock is relatively permanent. It doesn't move, right? It provides a habitat that is invariant under time. And as you know, this is not the case for the ocean. And that makes the system highly complex, and it requires us to model also that surface that the communities are flourishing on. And well, actually, you may ask, what about, let's say, the ocean surface? Is it now two-dimensional, or is it not? Maybe it is determined by the three-dimensional flow of the ocean, but maybe it's actually neither two-dimensional or three-dimensional, maybe it's fractal. So you have to consider the complexity of the system. And that's why we need to have a corresponding modeling expertise. Just to remind the physicists among you, Kolmogorov knew already in 1941 that in three-dimensional isotropic turbulence, there's an energy cascade by which large eddies become smaller eddies, and then eventually, so this is basically the inverse length scale. This is the very small scales. That's where energy is dissipated in terms of heat. At the molecular scale, this is where energy is injected at the large scales, and in between there's a scale-free behavior. That means you look at the system at different scales and it looks exactly the same statistically. So that's the challenge of a turbulent fluid, that you cannot really see with which scale you're actually operating. And in principle, you have to resolve all these scales from the global scale down to the nanometer scale to properly model the ocean or the atmosphere. That's impossible. That's why we need parametrizations. That's why we need to take shortcuts here and there. But this is just highlighting the complexity of a fluid. Okay, so there's another caveat, which is that if you're actually operating in 2 dimensions, let's say the ocean surface, if that was a 2-dimensional fluid, then this cascade is reversed. So the smaller eddies become larger eddies, and there's competition between these 2 aspects of turbulence. Okay, here's a nice image by Geomar, a simulation that highlights this complexity of the ocean. These are ocean mesoscale eddies simulated in a computer simulation. And as you see, they affect especially the coastal ocean, where friction plays a much larger role, so you sort of instigate these mesoscale eddies. And these mesoscale eddies are neither 2-dimensional or 3-dimensional because they are subject locally to convection in the ocean, meaning water mass is rising or subsiding and creating these eddies. So if we really want to capture the system, we need to have high-resolution models that capture mesoscale eddies, which is, let's say, tens of kilometers. So you need to resolve down to kilometer scale in the ocean to capture these. And they are relevant for the tropical coastal ocean. Here's an example where it really matters. These are the famous marine protected areas that ZMT has been dealing with for a long time. This is a map, Indonesia, or let's say the coral triangle, where you see in the red the different marine protected areas. And they are obviously all close to the coast, where most of the fish populations and other ecological components are. And you might ask, are these marine protected areas placed in an optimal way to protect biodiversity? You might ask this, and this is something we don't know because it's a very complex question to ask. You might have different designs for marine protected areas, make them very big, and have some kind of flow going through them. Is this optimal? It depends on how the larvae actually behave, how they disperse, and they are partially subject to the flow, partially they move on their own. So this could be an optimal design, but maybe you want to make the marine protected areas smaller, but more numerous, or you want to change their geometry, right? So these are different options you might have, and we cannot answer these questions without actually modeling the coastal oceans. So there are efforts to measure larvae dispersal, but that's a huge effort where genetic information is taken from the larvae and then tracked. This is very expensive and it is not easy to do. So these efforts exist, but yeah, so if you want to understand fish populations, fishery management and so on, then you need to do this, but you might as well try to model the flow instead and get some idea of how to design MPAs, right? So this is one example that matters for ZMT, where you directly see the relation between the modeling and the impact. Now, I think what ZMT is what is ZMT's core expertise is to gather data in situations where, let's say, oceanic cruises don't usually go, meaning exclusive economic zone. And I think that's an area where ZMT can really make an impact by using their network, their scientific network, to enter regions that are usually exclusive to the countries that ZMT works with and that are not accessible by, let's say, a meteor cruise or Sonne or such efforts that are outside of those exclusive areas. Now, not everything is turbulent, and this is also an aspect that is highlighted in TropEcS. We have things like the Walker circulation, the Hadley circulation. These large-scale circulations are determined by the continents and simply the latitudinal gradients. So these systems have to be taken into account. That means we also need a climate model that actually captures things like ENSO more or less realistically. And one area where this is important is Peru, one of the focus regions in TropEcS, where upwelling is an important question for the ecological fish communities and the fisheries there. Right? So to get the upwelling right, one needs to get ENSO right, and that requires appropriate modeling that can capture more or less large-scale modes like ENSO. Another focus region is Indonesia, where more runoff-dominated effects are relevant. So here, it is important to understand the land surface processes as well. That means we need to combine the modeling of the ocean with a proper modeling of the land surface. So there are at least three components to such a model, right? And here's another aspect I want to mention, which is climate extremes or weather extremes in the coastal areas. So here, the land surface can also play an important role in generating extreme events. It was mentioned already by Björn earlier that the soil and, for example, deforestation can affect how storms build up over the land. And of course, this can affect the coastal ocean. For example, when, let's say, mesoscale convective systems interfere with sea breezes, right? So one aspect where this is relevant is mangroves. Mangroves can be thought of as a flood protection measure. They are like a sponge that sort of moderate storm surges. So if we want to model mangroves properly, we need to approach a sub-kilometer scale in coastal, oceanic, and atmospheric modeling, and getting the runoff right from the land surface. So here's a simulation taken from WRF. This is a colleague of mine, Edward Engelbrecht, who simulates using the WRF model, which is actually frequently used in the tropics. These are mesoscale convective systems off along the coast of West Africa that are approaching the open ocean. So you see here an MCS, mesoscale convective system. There's a cold pool, a gigantic cold pool. And this is the town of Dakar. This is the open Atlantic Ocean. And sometimes sea breezes interfere with these mesoscale convective systems and cause pronounced flooding in Dakar. So that's an aspect that would be interesting to study. Actually, this is some pictures from a campaign that we're running in Senegal. Bash is here. He's one of the leading figures in the study. He is here, very happy because we've put up a station there. And well, this effort could combine with things like Futuro in the future, right? So this is an interesting little project we have going on. So to summarize, this is a cartoon taken from ZMT's website, so I assume it's up to date, and it's very nice to use this to highlight a few key aspects I think are relevant for TropEcS. For example, the upwelling is an important factor. We need to properly model wind stress and the large-scale circulation to approach an upwelling model. Plastic, litter, these are things that are advected by the ocean, so we certainly need to understand how they are transported and how they are also degraded in the ocean. Coral reefs at the center of ZMT's attention. We need to understand coastal temperature changes, salinity, and ocean acidification. So these are things we cannot resolve in a coarse resolution model. Extreme weather, I already talked about for the previous slides, needs high resolution, and I think also tidal modeling is really relevant here if we want to get storm surges right. Then fisheries and nutrient input, this is where we can combine with economic models, for example, the competition between large-scale fleets that are operating outside of the exclusive economic zone that are competing with local fisheries. This could imply making economic models that combine with actually biological or physical fisheries models, right? So these are just a few aspects that I think are extremely exciting for ZMT and that require a joint effort and combining different modeling expertises. Some efforts in this direction already exist, so there's competition out there. This is an initiative using WRF, and it does incorporate already trophic levels, but only actually more the basal level in the trophic. So you have different trophic levels, but this initiative focuses mainly on the basal level. So I think it is ZMT can do more. And well, the question is how to maybe use a different modeling chain, then WRF, or perhaps also consider WRF for this purpose, but ICON could definitely be an interesting candidate as well. So that's just to mention one competitor. There are probably others out there. Now so this is a sort of requirements I just want to summarize. I think we need to downscale to kilometer resolution. We need to model tidal effects. We must couple land, ocean, and atmosphere. They're all relevant at the coast. Everything comes together. We need to incorporate biogeochemical processes, and we have to capture things like temperature, salinity, nutrient changes in the coastal ocean. So we probably need a coupled model that gets SSTs right, especially in the coastal area, which is difficult. So as a discussion point, do we want to have a climate simulation that we simply downscale, or do we want to do we want to have a full coupled regionally downscale but interactive modeling chain? So there's maybe a question one has to discuss. Okay, but let's start now. So we shouldn't waste any time, and we should get going. Thank you for your attention.